From the virtual newsroom of Impact Alpha, this is your Impact Briefing for Friday, November 13th. I'm Brian Walsh. Today I'm joined by Roundtable regulars, Imogen Rose Smith and David Bank. Hey, Imogen.
Hi, Brian.
And hi, David.
Hey, Brian. Hey, Imogen.
Hey, David.
I look forward to discussing with you both the word of the week, transition. But first, here's what you need to know from this week in Impact Investing. There's an impact investing angle to Pfizer's promising COVID vaccine. The Gates Foundation made a $55 million investment last fall in BioNTech, the German company that is Pfizer's partner on the vaccine. The program-related investment, or PRI, from Gates was originally aimed at vaccines and therapies for tuberculosis and HIV. But the race for a COVID vaccine was a chance for BioNTech to show off its messenger RNA vaccine technology. If successful, messenger RNA, or mRNA, could revolutionize vaccines more broadly. BioNTech shares, under $19 a year ago, are now over $100. Gender is material to the COVID recovery. That's according to Criterion Institute's Joy Anderson and Gender Smart's Suzanne Beagle in a guest post on Impact Alpha. The two compiled 10 gender-related indicators, from workforce to infrastructure, that governments can use to design stimulus packages or fund managers can use to find their next deal. Next Tuesday's Agents of Impact call will take up gender-smart investing for sustainable recovery with the IFC, CDC Group, and some sharp fund managers in Africa and South Asia. Go to impactalpha.com to register. Blended capital transactions fall short, but social bonds are hot. Convergence, the global network for blended finance, reported that last year 45 deals totaling $8 billion used catalytic capital to increase private sector investment in developing economies. The number of deals in total financing were below the average for the last 5 years. On the other hand, so-called social bond issuances from governments, development banks, and corporations have more than quadrupled this year. S&P Global Ratings said issues of such social bonds totaled $72 billion as of October 2020 and could reach $100 billion for the year. The total sustainable debt market, including green bonds, could jump from $341 billion last year to a new record $500 billion this year. The Biden-Harris transition team released the names of 500 members of its agency review teams, and the list is chock full of agents of impact. Among them, Bill Bynum of Hope Enterprises, Elizabeth Littlefield of Albright Stonebridge Group, Xavier Briggs, formerly of the Ford Foundation, Florence Chen of Generate Capital, Martha Gimbel of Schmidt Futures, and Dennis Kelleher of Better Markets. Ron Klain, the veteran operative set to become Biden's chief of staff, has most recently been a top executive at Revolution, the venture fund founded by Steve Case. All right, now it's time for our feature conversation with Imogen and David. We're going to talk about the presidential transition that is underway, if not yet quite fully acknowledged. David, what are the impact investing implications of this presidential transition?
Well, there's kind of this pent-up demand for action that people have been waiting a very long time for. So there's a lot of kind of frothy talk. A lot of it is focused on climate, which we should dig into more deeply, because I think that's where the contrast between the new administration and the old one might be perhaps the most stark. But there's a lot of other things. There's an ESG direction and policy making to be done. There's a stimulus package to be passed, including green aspects to it. And there's, of course, COVID, which is probably the biggest hurdle to get over for any kind of positive impact to ensue.
And Imogen, what's your take on all of this?
I mean, it's the dawn of a new day, and therefore, I agree with David for a change. I do think that there is a lot of pent-up demand. I think we've seen a lot of, enthusiasm by the impact investing community. The Obama administration was very supportive of the sort of the impact policy agenda, in addition to a lot of the sort of issues that we think about under the tent of ESG and impact investing, specifically climate change, but also other factors. And obviously, a lot of that was either frozen and or rolled back under the Trump administration. Again, the Paris Accord being the most obvious. And some of that is certainly going to change under a Biden administration. He's already said that day one, the US will get back into the Paris Climate Agreement. I think where I temper my enthusiasm is twofold. One is, as always, this assumption that somehow impact investing is going to be first and foremost at the front of anyone's agenda, right? I think that there are huge issues that need to be dealt with. You also likely are going to have a, Republican Senate, a Democratic House, and a Democratic president. And yeah, there's going to be concerns like COVID, the stimulus package, all of these issues which have implications for impact investing, but aren't necessarily going to afford, although sometimes they will, the impact investing community a seat at the table. And the second issue is that I think that there are, particularly on the climate change front, significant domestic concerns and concerns for the Democratic Party and its political future that, need to be addressed. Like, if you look at the electoral map, if you look at what states Biden won or looks like he's won and where he lost states or where he lost ground, it's clear that fracking is a problem, and that just saying, oh, we're going to end fracking, which, the right implied that Biden did, and he tried to walk back in the election, is not, it's not a winning strategy for Democrats if they want to hold and retain power. So I think it's going to be a lot more complicated than we necessarily wish or hope to, to achieve many of the goals that the impact investing community would like to see achieved.
Can I jump in on that? Just to say, the fracking thing, we wrote quite a bit about it, and others did as well, that it ain't the Democrats who are killing fracking. Fracking is too expensive for a world of $40 a barrel oil. It's the oil economy that's killing fracking. And the problem has always been that that this becomes a kind of hobby horse for Republicans to beat on Dems about job loss in the fossil fuel industry, but the job possibilities, and in fact the job realities in green energy, are much greater. And it seems to me that this messaging problem you talk about is really a problem of Dems getting across the notion that where the jobs are going to be created is in this green energy transition.
Yeah, and they've done a terrible job of that. And part of the reason they've done a terrible job of that is because they haven't necessarily always brought organized labor along with them, right? And that, that they might be empirically correct, but they're losing on the message and they're losing on what people believe. And so, Rahm Emanuel turning around and saying, oh, well, everyone's going to have to learn to computer program, again, isn't super helpful, right? And so, and yeah, just because it's not true doesn't mean it's not, deeply believed.
I agree with that. And the other thing that I wanted to pick up on what you said, which I think is right, is that in fact the prospect of divided government may make impact investing have even more central role, because presumably there's less support for government spending and therefore the private capital pouring in, and it is pouring in on green energy and climate related things, not just solar, but also batteries and electric vehicles and charging stations, and even a bunch of high-tech agriculture that we've talked about on this show. That the private capital play, which frankly is seen with some skepticism on the left sometimes, think that's there's something nefarious about it, but that could play a role in just kind of moving markets towards that the Biden signals could open the markets up and the private capital could flow.
It's already clear that we've seen more capital go into impact investing over the past 4 years, even despite having a Republican as president. So it's already happening.
Well, that's interesting. Whether that I think there was a lot of rebound effect, right? People wanted to do something, and one way to do something was with their investment dollars. And we heard a lot of people, coming around to impact investing as kind of a, I don't know, counter programming in a certain way. I wonder whether that impetus gets lost and they go back to expecting the government to do everything.
Yeah, and I do wonder though too, just on the point about divided government, even if the Democrats aren't able to pick up the 2 Senate seats in the Georgia Senate runoff, there's a lot that President Biden will be able to do through executive order, and personnel is policy in so many ways. And so as he launches his transition team and starts, building out his cabinet, those federal agencies will be able to reverse a lot of the things that the Trump administration did via executive order and via regulatory filings that don't require congressional approval. And so, what's your take on how much of an enabling environment the Biden administration will provide for the goals and outcomes that impact investors are looking for?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think that's really important. I think one of the top things on the wish list is rolling back the new Department of Labor guidance regarding ERISA pension plans and sort of ESG/impact investing. That's become a sort of political back and forth between different administrations. But the idea, simply put, is that this Department of Labor guidance was putting a check on the ability for pension fiduciaries in particular to invest in ESG investments. And it's sort of widely expected / hoped. And they rolled out a guidance in the last couple of months that was very aggressive in terms of putting a check on that kind of investing. And it's sort of widely expected and hoped that guidance will once again be overturned.
I agree with you, Imogen, but with one small correction, which is that it wasn't just guidance; it was an actual rule,
You're right.
which in federal policy parlance actually is tougher to turn around, and they have to go through a whole nother rulemaking process with comments and everything else. So, yes, they will work on it, no doubt, but it will take longer than probably folks hope.
No, you're right. It's a rule, not a guidance. They did a guidance at the beginning, and then they just did a rule. From what I've heard from talking to people, I don't think it will take much longer, because I think they were so cautious under the Obama administration to change the guidance. I think that they'll be much more strident now in reversing the rule. And I think I've talked about this before, but the Republican administration, when they went in, they basically had a checklist of things that they wanted to change for the sort of financial policy shops. And they just went through it. And I think that you'll see Democrats historically have tended to be a lot more cautious. I think, they have to be concerned that this is only that Biden's only a one-term president, right? They don't have the luxury of time, I think, and they've got a lot of problems they need to solve. And apparently, this ERISA guidance is something that they do want to get done. So I'm not saying it'll happen day one, but I don't think we'll be sitting here 4 years from now when they won't have changed it.
I agree. There's an additional nuance in that, which is that, as I recall, the Obama level guidance said, in effect, you could take environmental social factors into account as kind of a tiebreaker if the financial returns were effectively equal. So you were allowed to then consider environment, ESG, but the world has moved on in a sense, and now the activists, I think, are pushing that, say no, actually environmental and social factors are material, and that if you're doing your fiduciary duty, you must or you should take them into account.
Do you think this might be an example, David, where the market is moving ahead of the policy, in the sense that, in the same way that fracking and other carbon fuels, carbon-intensive fuels, are becoming price prohibitive just based on market forces, not even government regulations, and the overturning of the ERISA guidance, or the pendulum swinging back on ERISA guidance to incorporate ESG, might almost be, in some sense, unnecessary, because the market has already moved on to incorporating ESG considerations into the kind of as the default of so much of the asset management industry decision making.
Well, I think that's sort of what I meant about pent up demand. Yeah, the market has moved on. I mean, what makes it frustrating is just to think of where things might have been had we not had 4 years of kind of obstacles. But as you say, the market has moved on in climate. The market has moved on in ESG. Things are much more mature and sophisticated and robust now than they were a few years ago. So it really is, from my point of view, sort of, I don't know, go time in some sense, right? A lot of things that impact investors and sustainable finance have been planning. It's time to now roll all that out. And I think you're absolutely right, Imogen. Personnel is policy, or maybe that was you, Brian. Personnel is policy.
I'll take it. I agree with it, but it was Brian.
There's a lot of impact folks in these, transition advance teams that are stocking the federal agencies, and it's not going to be, again, it's not impact investing qua impact investing. It's just solutions, innovation, practical approaches.
And I do think, kind of building on your point from earlier, David, I do think there is something to be said for Washington as not having been the epicenter of impact for 4 years. I think, talking less about policy and more about doing arguably has been, of benefit to the impact investing community. On the other hand, since Trump was a one-term president, it means that people are still around. They haven't all left DC. It's not been like 8 years since they last had a government job. And so some stuff that was already underway, or some people who are already working on these issues, yes, are on the transition committee. And, there's more of, just despite the ongoing obstruction from the outgoing administration and recognizing, we don't know what's coming down the pipeline, it should be more of a plug in and play to sort of move some of these agendas forward early on.
Well, that seems like a good place to leave it. Again, our word of the week is transition. Thank you, Imogen, and thank you, David.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you both.
And both of you.
That's going to do it for your Impact Briefing this week. You can read all of these stories at impactalpha.com. Subscribers receive the brief and full access to Impact Alpha, including subscriber-only Agent of Impact calls. Go to impactalpha.com/subscribe and use code BRIEFING100 for $100 off. Thank you for listening, and thanks to David, Imogen, and our producer, Isaac Silk. I'm Brian Walsh, head of impact for the fintech company Liquidnet. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please take a second to rate and review the show right now. It really helps us reach more listeners. And make sure you check back for next week's Impact Briefing. Until then, take care and be well.